to you.
How sobering is it for you to preside over the first recession in 28 years?
Well, yesterday was devastating news for the Australian economy. Indeed, for all Australians, we had a record run of 28 consecutive years of economic growth. Our economy was the envy of the world. Even after the horrible bushfires at the start of this year, the ongoing drought and some difficult international economic conditions, we were still on track for the first budget surplus in 12 years, and we had delivered the first balanced budget in 11 years. But then COVID-19 hit, a once-in-a-century pandemic. There was very little governments could do to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Obviously, we responded with unprecedented economic support. That's helped save 700,000 jobs, but the damage to the economy has been immense, and they were borne out in yesterday's numbers.
How many negative quarters are you expecting?
Well, as you know, we had 0.3% down in the March quarter. Yesterday was 7% down, the single largest fall on record. Treasury's advice is that in the September quarter it's likely to either be just negative or flat. But that again will depend to some extent on what transpires in Victoria. As you know, the state's expected to come out of stage 4 restrictions mid-September, and we await Daniel Andrews' plan on Sunday for that. But as a quarter of the national economy, what happens in Victoria will be very important for our economic recovery overall.
OK, well, figures out today, they show that tourism has been hit by $54.6 billion. If state leaders defy a bid to declare hotspots, how does that help?
Well, a common definition of hotspot will help the recovery. It not only will lead to better economic outcomes, but it will also lead to better health and well-being outcomes, because it's just not on, Pete, that you can have a 4-year-old boy who's being treated for cancer, who's separated from his mother because of the border closures. It's just not on that a woman loses an unborn child because of confusion at the borders. It's just not on that a school teacher from Victoria who lives 2 kilometres from the South Australian border is not deemed an essential worker to go and teach their class. And then today we hear a news story of a grandmother of 7 who is recovering from brain surgery, who asked to be quarantined at home and to self-isolate and to recover at her home in Queensland, yet she's been forced into hotel quarantine while the football officials can go and sit by the pool bar in Queensland. That's just not on. It seems to be double standards.
Just on those figures, though, those tourism figures, I mean, it's so hard to describe how bad that is, that tourism sector, $54.6 billion, as I say, and the vast majority of that, I would presume, is out of Queensland.
Well, interstate tourism is around a third, or a bit more than a third, of the overall $100 billion tourism dollar, and it's critical that we get interstate tourism back and up and running. I mean, it's important to those people who work in the airlines. It's important to those people who work in the hotels. It's important to those people who work in the hospitality industry. It's important to travel agents and tourism operators. There are hundreds of thousands of people who make their living out of the tourism industry, and having unnecessary border closures is an impediment to those people getting back to work.
Is there a chance that you may never preside over a surplus budget?
Well, again, events change very quickly. What my number one focus is, and that of the Prime Minister and our government, is to get as many Australians back to work. I have to say, Pete, that outside of Victoria, we are starting to see people get back to work. We have seen the restrictions eased, and of the 1.3 million people who lost their job or saw their hours reduced to zero at the start of the crisis, now around 700,000, or a bit more than half, are back at work. Obviously, Victoria is a different situation altogether, with an expectation that up to 400,000 people that would fill 4 MCGs on Grand Final Day will lose their jobs or see their hours reduced to zero as a result of that crisis in Victoria. So it really is a country, our country, one country, which has an economy that's operating at 2 speeds, Victoria and the rest.
Will you bring forward the stage 2 and stage 3 tax cuts next year?
Well, we're considering our options as to the timing of those tax cuts. We went to the last election with a plan to cut taxes, $158 billion worth of tax cuts off the back of $144 billion in tax cuts in the budget before. Labor went to the last election promising $387 billion of higher taxes, which is still on their books. What we are now looking to do is consider what options we have for the timing of those tax cuts, recognising it will put more money into people's pockets. More money in people's pockets means more income, more spending. More spending means more jobs.
But both stage 2 and stage 3 are on the cards together?
Well, any of those decisions will be unveiled at budget time, which is just over a month away.
OK. The business groups want the 25% company tax rate extended to companies with turnovers of less than $1 billion. So that extends, that includes the businesses less than 50 million. So that goes up to $1 billion. Is that something that's on your radar as well?
Well, we have cut company tax for those small and medium-sized businesses down to 25%, and that was something that, again, our opposition opposed, the Labor opposition opposed us on, and we were still able to get it through the Parliament. When it comes to the bigger companies, what we are working through is options to encourage investment, particularly around new machinery, capital expenditure, building new infrastructure, which will help them become more productive over the longer term. So the issue of business tax incentives is one that we are considering again in the budget context.
Are you feeling brave, Treasurer? Are you feeling bold in the lead up to, the budget this year? Because there's an opportunity here for some serious reform. Do you feel like taking a risk?
Well, I'm absolutely feeling focused. My number one focus is to get Australians back into work, because while we're talking about the numbers today, Pete, Australians are living them. And whether you're a tourism operator in Cairns or you're a cafe worker in Melbourne, you are feeling the pain of COVID-19. Now, there are a number of initiatives that we already have underway, not just the JobKeeper program, but also the job seeker payments, obviously the business incentives that are underway, the 340,000 new positions for training to get people reskilled and re-equipped for the workforce, as well as, of course, bringing forward up to $10 billion in infrastructure spending. All those initiatives are underway right now, but there will be more in the budget. And again, it's going to take 5 years to get our economy back to where it was. It's going to require a full court press, not just from the federal government, but also from the state governments. It's going to involve reform. It's going to require patience, but it's also going to require hard heads as we approach the recovery of this crisis.
You're unlikely to have a surplus budget in those 5 years, though, wouldn't you predict?
Well, again, every dollar that we have spent through this crisis has been a borrowed dollar. That's increased our debt levels. We need to service those debt levels. And obviously, it's not just been the expenditure side of the balance sheet that's been hit through this crisis. It's also been the revenue side. And because more people are out of work, you're seeing less income tax paid. And because business profits have also been hit, you're going to see company tax receipts also take a hit. So it's the revenue and the expenditure side that is hurting through this crisis.
Just finally, Treasurer, you did refer to this, but some details have been leaked when it comes to Melbourne's roadmap out. So it looks as though the lockdown is going to be extended for another fortnight. Curfews are going to remain. There's no clear timeline for businesses to reopen, though. This is according to the Herald Sun this morning. Can I get your reaction to some of those details?
Well, obviously seen those reports of the leaked document, but I await the final plan from Daniel Andrews on Sunday. It's important that it's a fair dinkum plan. It's important that it's a plan that gives Victorians hope, that it shows Victorians there's a road out of the crisis in their state. It's important that the plan gives certainty and confidence to business to open their doors, to get people back to work. That's what people are looking for from the Andrews government. They want to hear more about the road out and less about the longer road in.